All right, the AU-EU summit is currently underway in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire with calls for action on migration and the slave trade that is currently taking place in Libya. Now, the two continents call for working together in order to tackle the challenges that are facing their countries. Calls for decisive action on the slave trade on African migrants in Libya featured prominently at the opening of the Africa-EU summit in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire. European and African countries gathered under one roof to discuss relations from trade, investment, migration and working together. Germany's Angela Merkel and France's Emmanuel Macron were some of the leaders who shared the stage with President Jacob Zuma. The EU has welcomed the redefining of relations with the AU, saying events of migration should not drive the wedge between the two continents. All right, our reporter Mzwandile Mbeje is at the AU-EU summit out in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire and is now joining us for a live update. Mzwandile, a very good afternoon to you. There's been wide calls worldwide for migration or action rather on migration as well as the slave trade that is currently taking place in Libya. Has this been a prominent feature on the agenda at the summit? And what were some of the resolutions in regards to this?
Thank you very much, Alicia. I'm sure you will see quite a crowd on your camera there. There is the president of Ivory Coast, President Alassane Ouattara, who has just come to the media center to actually thank the media for the role it has played. And you can imagine, so everyone was excited. People were trying to get the interviews and get the pictures with the president. But back to your question, Alicia, this summit has really pronounced very strongly on the issue of slave trade. We have seen images of slaves being sold for as little as $400 on various television networks. So what this summit has done was to make a very strong call to say this must end, and as a result they want an investigation and they will intervene. Basically, who will lead that investigation, that intervention is the UN, is the AU and the EU, because they're saying these kinds of practices in today's world are actually taking back all the gains, and what they have come here to negotiate really is being set back when you witness events like we've been witnessing in Libya, Alicia.
Mzwandile, what are some of the human rights bodies that particularly in Libya, what have they said about those shocking images and of course this rumored trade of slaves that is currently taking place in Libya?
Alicia, what complicates matters in Libya is that you do have a government that is globally recognized, but the fact of the matter is that certain militias are in charge of certain parts of the country. As much as the government that is in place right now would condemn and say it doesn't support what is happening, it may not necessarily be up to it in terms of what it needs to do. That is why this call by the AU, EU and other various human rights organizations has been made to say there must be an intervention. And that intervention, we understand that the AU will mandate the Human Rights Committee or the Commission to go deeper into that, because already the Libyans presented to the leaders here to say, so we are already investigating this. We have identified about 42 sites. It's not all of them, but it's what they were able to identify. And of course, they are pursuing those perpetrators. One of the things they've decided to do is to work with the Europeans to try and close, or rather and freeze, the accounts of the perpetrators in this whole saga. So This practice is being condemned, Alicia, by everyone. But as I'm saying, the vacuum really that is in Libya since Muammar Gaddafi was killed is really showing, because people are just doing their own thing and they are not accounting to anyone. So it's up to the international community really to take a lead on this one, because it's quite it's quite painful to see such images in the 20th century, rather than the 21st century.
Look, Mzwandile, we understand that France's Macron and, of course, Germany's Merkel are both there sharing the stage with President Jacob Zuma. Maybe do tell us, what are some of the challenges that you've actually picked up through some of the discussions held there? What are some of the common challenges or common trends that the two continents are actually facing? Do we see a common trend, and how do they pledge this summit to try and iron out those issues and bring about awareness to those very issues?
Alicia, this was actually supposed to be one of those summits where leaders had broadly agreed on the agenda item. They had come here to speak about how do they redefine their relationship. You know that in the past, European countries were mainly the donors, and then Africans were mainly the recipients. But the narrative is changing to say, yes, we do need assistance, but the kind of assistance that we need is the assistance in skills, in capacity. So which means we would need trade and investment, where we will need assistance from you as Europeans. We will indicate, but let this agenda be driven by us as Africans, of course, as equal partners. So with this issue of the slave trade, things tended to change a bit, because then it ended up dominating the proceedings. It then goes back to the issue of migration. Alicia, for the past 2 years or so, we've been witnessing horrific scenes in the Mediterranean Sea, primarily people trying to leave Africa through Libya to Europe. It's actually that which those militias in Libya are taking advantage of, because these are people who are vulnerable, who have left their countries because of poverty or because of conflicts. So they go through via Libya, and now Libya, because these people are vulnerable, is taking advantage of them. By saying Libya, I'm not necessarily meaning to the authorities, but I'm meaning to those various militias that are roaming the streets and are in charge in parts of the country. So the issue of migration was one of those issues to say there needs to be a way of really managing and controlling it, because, Alicia, will never be able to stop migration. It's in the nature of human beings to migrate, either within the continent or from one continent to the other.
All right. And before I let you go, a quick one, Mzwandile, what else, when can we actually expect the roundup of the summit, like the resolutions? Is there going to be a briefing at the end of the summit? Tell us about that.
I can confirm to you that the summit has just concluded, and then one of the main calls coming out from this summit is that there needs to be an immediate intervention into what is happening in Libya. And then, of course, that intervention will be led by this continent in the form of the AU, will be led by the EU, and you need the UN. So once that intervention looks at all those issues, then they'll be able then to report back to say what extra issues need to be attended to. We did hear that there also must be a task team to go deep into these issues and investigate them. But as I can say, it was a summit about trade and investment. Yes, they did speak about those issues, but the issue of slave trade in Libya dominated proceedings, Alicia.
All right, then you can head on straight to the airport. Mzwai, we'll see you back in the country. Thank you so much. That is Mzwandile Mbeje. He's the SABC presidential reporter out in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, and is giving us an update on the EU summit that is currently taking place there.